Lesson number 5, Interpersonal Relationship. 5.1, Learning Objectives. At the end of this lesson, the student should be able to explain the concept of transactional analysis and the need to maintain a healthy interpersonal relationship in an organization. Differentiate between complementary and non-complementary transactions. Students should be able to understand the concept of life positions and their importance in the organization. Students should be able to understand the importance of stroke and the concept of psychological games. Finally, students should be able to understand the importance of jury window as a tool for improving interpersonal relationships. 5.2, Introduction. Organizations accomplish their objectives through their employees. It takes collective efforts which require smooth interpersonal interactions among employees. Globalization and technology improvements have made it more critical for employees to interact with one another and ensure smooth interpersonal communication to enhance organizational effectiveness. As Aristotle said, man is a social animal. By extension, employees interact with one another and work in close associations. Employees working together share a special bond that makes them feel connected with one another and the organization itself. A healthy interpersonal relationship makes employees more productive and positive and renders the entire working environment more salubrious. An interpersonal relationship is a dialectic relationship that is interactive. Now this interaction can be one-to-one basis, one-to-group basis, group-to-one basis, or group-to-group basis. Besides, these transactions can be cooperative or conflicting. The cooperative transaction is a win-to-win scenario for both the organization and the members partaking in it. Some skills that can help navigate an individual to these significant transactions without a hitch are mutual trust, positive thinking, empathy, and courtesy. Accomplishing successful interpersonal relations in the context of organizational goals is the challenging and slow process. It requires a deep psychological understanding of one's as well as of others. Every manager is responsible for managing interpersonal relations in his department in such a way that everybody cooperates willingly in accomplishing the organizational goals. Without good interpersonal relations, there will be an atmosphere of misunderstanding and conflicts in the organization. After a long time of research, several behavioral scientists recommended the use of various tools for analyzing and managing interpersonal behavior in an organization for the betterment of organization and its people. The present lesson explores some of these tools like ego states, life positions, psychological games, strokes, and the jury window. 5.3, Transactional Analysis. Transaction refers to communication and exchange of dialogue between two individuals. Transactions consist of two components. One, transaction stimulus, that is, it is given by a person who starts communication. And secondly, transaction response, that is, it is provided by a person who receives transaction stimulus. When two individuals interact, one responds to the other. This is called a social transaction. The study of these transactions is known as transactional analysis or TA. Based on the ideas of Sigmund Freud's psychometric theory of childhood experiences in the late 1950s, Eric Berne developed transactional analysis theory. It is a psychoanalytic theory and a therapy method that helps understand interpersonal behavior and analyze social interaction between people. Transactional analysis is a theory to improve interpersonal communication. Transactional analysis was initially thought to be a simple model and was criticized. But eventually, the understanding of transactional analysis increased and many acknowledged it. Transactional analysis has wide applications in clinical, therapeutic, organizational, and personal development, encompassing communications, management, personality, relationships, and behavior. Today, TA is used in organizations as psychotherapy. Eric Berne said that verbal communication, particularly face to face communication, is at the center of human social relationships and psychoanalysis. His starting point was that when two people encounter each other, one of them will speak to the other, which is called the transactional stimulus. The reaction from the other person is called transactional response. The present lesson includes the concept of ego states, life position, psychological games, strokes, and the Johari window that could help understand how interpersonal relationships could become smooth. 5.4 Ego states. Humans are teeming with whims and fancies. Accordingly, when employees interact, their conduct varies as per the situation. An employee is cooperative at one time and grumpy at the other. He is cordial to one colleague and gives a cold shoulder to another. Such different actions occur because of varying ego states. At the core of transactional analysis are the ego states. Paul Federn coined the term ego states. According to this, human personality comprises three ego states. Ego states refers to the pattern of behavior. As one grows up, one develops a certain behavior pattern known as the ego states. According to Dr. Eric Berne, there are three ego states, namely parent ego, adult ego, and the child ego. Each ego state consists of some common behavioral pattern an individual follows in various situations. Usually, their present-day reactions are based on their past experiences and feelings. Following is a brief detail on each ego state. 5.4.1 The parent ego state. Parent ego refers to the personality attributes of values, attitudes, and behavior of parent-like people inherited by a person when he was a child. An individual assimilates such behavior from parent figures like a teacher, father, mother, brother, or any other person who is elderly and displays an advisory behavior, which is copied by a child and subsequently displayed in his life when such situation arises. Either someone makes decisions for you or they show protection and care. Both types of behavior represent the parent ego. Parent ego can be of following two types. Number 1, nurturing parent ego. The nurturing parent ego state has attributes like empathy, comfort, and protection towards others. In this state, an individual tries to understand others and emanates empathy towards them. Actions taken from this state instill confidence and encourage others to go on and are full of appreciations for people and their positive behaviors. For instance, a person in this ego state will say, "What can I do to help you?" Number 2, critical parent ego. The critical parent ego state is about blaming others and giving unconstructive criticism. It includes actions like attacking other people, being extremely judgmental, not listening, and not being interested in an explanation. The critical parent will write you off as a person rather than deal with your behavior. However, they are always ready to respond with a should or ought to almost anything that people tell them. For instance, an individual in this critical parent ego state will say, "You must submit your assignment by evening." 5.4.2 The adult ego state. An adult's ego state refers to a pattern of behavior where an individual behaves more logically. Past experiences do not influence such individuals and they believe in seeking facts and tend to reflect problem-solving behavior. Their behavior is inclined toward rational decision making. They analyze the situation after going through the available facts and behave rationally. Logical thinking, thoughtful conversation, and factual discussion are the cornerstone of an adult ego state. The adult ego state is stored by facts, not feelings and emotions. 5.4.3 The child ego state. The child ego state refers to a pattern of behavior that could be characterized by spontaneous, impulsive, creative, and emotional components of personality. A child's ego state could take two types. One is happy child, no harm to anyone, and the second is a destructive child. Behavior might harm others or themselves. People operating in this state usually act as they did when they were a child. The child ego state is primarily concerned with feelings, though that does not mean that when in the here or now experience, the person does not have access to attitudes and thinking, but it does simply mean that when activated, feelings are usually the executive energy force. People operating in this state act emotionally and make impulsive decisions. Immature behavior characterizes this state. Anxiety, dependence, fear, hate, and conformity are other characteristics of a child ego state. Physical and verbal cues such as giggling, compliance, seeking attention, and coyness indicate the child ego state. Following table shows some common characteristics under each type of ego state. For example, parent ego, teaching, demonstrating rules and laws, do's and don'ts, whereas adult ego represents rationality, objective, figuring out, evaluating. Lastly, child ego state includes spontaneous, impulsive, creativity, experiencing joy or frustration. Conclusion. There is no general rule regarding the effectiveness of any ego state in any given situation. Each type of ego state may lead to positive or negative behavior. It is not only about words but also about tone, body posture, expression, and gesture that reflects the ego state during a communication exchange. From an organizational perspective, learning and reflecting on the positive side of each ego state is essential. 5.5 Types of transactions. A transaction is a unit of social interaction consisting of an initiating message called the stimulus and a reply called the response. The stimulus and response might be verbal or non-verbal, but they must be received and acted upon by both parties. In other words, a transaction is a relationship between two people in which one says or does something and the other reacts. A transaction may involve any combination of ego states. Transactions are forms of interactions that develop early in life, such as parent-child, child-child, or adult-adult. For instance, young children, when ordered, become frightened or grumpy. Many years later, as grown-ups, they may get into a rut and reply to the same transaction. Following diagrammatic representations elucidate the exchange of transactions between two people. Figure 5.2 shows a transaction. An arrow passes from the ego state from which the stimulus originates to the ego state which receives the message. The arrow represented by R shows the corresponding response. Depending on the ego states of the person involved in transactions, there may be 4 types of transactions, namely complementary, non-complementary, ulterior, and gallows. 5.5.1 Complementary transactions. A stimulus invites a response. This response becomes a stimulus for further response, and so on. Appropriate and expected transactions indicate healthy human relationships. Successful communication take place when transactions are complementary. Complementary transactions is equal to effective plus complete communication. A transaction is complementary when a stimulus from one person gets the predicted response from the other. The transaction is complementary because both the interacting individuals act in the perceived and expected ego state. In such a transaction, both persons are satisfied and communication is complete. A complementary transaction occurs when the lines between the sender and receiver's ego state are parallel. Complementary transactions are of the following types. First is adult to adult transactions. Refer figure point 5.3. This is the most satisfactory transaction and leads to healthy communication. The individuals involved are rational, logical, and objective. Therefore, it is an ideal transaction within an organization. It is the best type of communication as it is respectful and reduces conflicts. The key to recognizing the adult to adult transaction is an unemotional exchange between the individuals. For example, supervisor says, "Have you finished your job?" This is adult to adult transaction. To which employee responds, "Yes sir, I finished it long back and it has already been delivered to the assembly section." Again, adult to adult transaction. Here, the supervisor wanted to take stock of the work assigned to the employee. The employee responded from his adult ego state. As a result, both individuals had effective and complete communication. Second type of transaction under complementary transaction is adult to parent transaction. Refer figure 5.4. In this transaction, an individual sends a transaction stimulus as an adult to another individual. If the other individual responds from the nurturing parent's ego state, the communication will be smooth. On the other hand, if the response comes from the critical parent ego state, it could give rise to the conflict. For example, employee X says, "Have you seen my files?" This is an adult to parent ego state transaction. To which employee Y respond, "No, but I can help you find it." So again, this is parent to adult ego state transaction. Here, an employee X inquires about his missing file, to which employee Y responded from his nurturing parent ego state. As a result, both individuals had effective and complete communication. Next is adult to child transaction. In this transaction, an individual may send a transaction stimulus as an adult to another individual and gets a response from a child's ego state. Such a transaction is generally not seen on work premises. For example, employee X says, "How are you?" This is an adult to child transaction. To which employee Y responds, "Oh, thanks for asking. I'm doing great." This is child to adult transaction. Here, employee X wanted a normal "How do you do" with employee Y. Employee Y, overwhelmed with the emotion, and responded from his child ego state. Since employee X expected such a response from employee Y, the communication was successful. Fourth is parent to parent transaction. Refer figure 5.6. In this transaction, the manager uses rewards, criticism, rules, and admonitions. The transaction can be beneficial if the employee supports him. Otherwise, the two may be needless competition as the employees will try to push their ideas. For example, supervisor says, "You must not unnecessarily experiment with things." This is a parent to parent ego state transaction. To which subordinate responded, "Great things don't happen without experiments." Again, this is from P to P transaction. Number 5. Parent to adult transaction. Refer figure 5.7. In this transaction, an individual sends a transactional stimulus as a parent to another individual and gets a response from an adult ego state. The stimulus uses dogmatic and overbearing language but gets countered with a logical reply. Therefore, conflicts over trivial matters have staved off. For example, employee X says, "You shouldn't sit straight." This is parent to adult transaction. To which employee Y responded, "I have a backache." This is parent to adult communication. Employee X called employee Y on his sitting posture. Instead of snapping at him, employee Y chose to reason with him and precluded a conflict. Number 6. Child-to-child transactions. In this transaction, an individual sends a transactional stimulus as a child to another individual and gets a response from a child ego state only. Such a type of transaction is not suitable for the workplace. Both individual acts on whims, fancies, and emotions in this transaction. Therefore, the organization suffers badly and the situation cannot last long. For example, employee X says, "Management should always think in favor of their employees." This is a child-to-child conversation. To which employee Y responded, "If management does not think in our favor, we will do the same towards them." Again, the response is from child ego state to child ego state. Both employees are work-linked with emotion. In the short run, such a transaction is smooth for the individuals involved, but in a long run, it is not good for the organization. Number 7. Child-to-parent transaction. For example, employee says, "To whom should I submit the file after completing it?" This is child-to-parent ego state transaction. To which manager responds, "You must always follow the chain of command for any official work." This is parent-to-child transaction. 8. Parent-to-child transaction. Refer figure 5.10. When the manager interacts from the parent ego and the employee responds with the child ego, this can be satisfying for both. In the short run, conflict and pressure are eliminated. But in the long run, the personality of the employee may remain underdeveloped, which may create the feeling of frustration. For example, employee X says, "I am feeling under the weather today. I must go and see the doctor." This is parent-to-child conversation. To which employee Y says, "Oh, I will take care of you." This is child-to-parent ego state transaction or response. Here, employee X acted from a parent ego state and received a response from employee Y through the child ego state. The resultant transaction is complete communication. Nevertheless, such transactions are not preferred in the workplace since they may lead to the underdevelopment of employee Y. 5.5.2 Non-complementary transaction. A non-complementary or cross transaction occurs when the person who initiates the transaction does not get the response from the expected ego state. In such transactions, the stimulus response lines are not parallel. Refer figure 5.11 for cross transactions. For example, supervisor says, "How many units have you made till now?" Here, supervisor is using adult ego state for this transaction to adult ego state. To which operator responds, "Do not inquire frequently. I will inform you after completing it." So here the response is from parent to child ego state. So the supervisor expected a rational response. Instead, the operator got worked up and replied from a parent ego state. As a result, the communication was not successful. Such a transaction will ultimately result in a dispute. Once the transaction is crossed, it results in unrest and dissatisfaction, leading to arguments and conflicts between the interacting parties. 5.5.3 Ulterior transactions. We all have been in a conversation where it is all about the unsaid. The real message is hiding behind the veil of social interaction. There is an overt and a covert message in such conversations. In transaction analysis, we call these transactions ulterior transactions. In ulterior transactions, two messages are conveyed simultaneously, a social message on top and a psychological one at the bottom. So it appears like the person is saying one thing, but there is something else he is trying to convey, left to the intelligence of the receiver. Now, these can be both enthralling and excruciating. Flirtatious games are a classic example of an exhilarating and enjoyable ulterior transaction, whereas on other occasions, the existence of a subtext is downright unpleasant. Salespersons are usually adept at deploying ulterior transactions. Following is an example of an ulterior transaction at play in an organization. For example, supervisor. What time is it, Kunal? Here, Kunal reached late to the office, to which the manager asked him this question. On the surface, he is confirming the time, but he intends to highlight that Kunal is late to the office. Ulterior transactions occur when three or more ego states interact at the same time. The interaction is at two levels: what the person says, the social message, and what he means, the psychological message. 5.5.4 Gallows transaction. Gallows transactions include laughs and smiles on the heels of a statement which is painful to the individual. The distinguishing mark of humor in the gallows transaction is that it isn't funny. Instead, the laugh serves as tightening the nose and the destructive behavior gets reinforced. Example, a teacher getting amused at the stupid behavior of her student. Conclusion, the adult-to-adult transaction is most effective in the organization because it is problem-solving, treats people as equals, and improves understanding. Though the adult-to-adult transactions are the most desirable, yet other complementary or parallel transactions are also workable depending upon situations and the willingness of both superiors and subordinates to develop a workable relationship. 5.6 Need of understanding transactional analysis. Transactional analysis is a prominent tool for positive change and growth. It is the study of how individuals introject certain behaviors, either by accident or from their early caretakers or authority figures, and then continue to acquaint themselves in that same behavior pattern. Transactional analysis is a model for people to work towards autonomy, where they can choose to live the way they want to and not act as if they are controlled by past events or messages. Determination of one's ego state through transactional analysis helps them to be in the driver's seat of their way of life. An understanding of the transactional analysis can help the person change their life script and choose to rewrite it without being hooked onto the inappropriate behaviors of the past. Before moving ahead, let us understand some commonly used jargon in transactional analysis. First, script. A story we have learnt and internalized about ourselves. Negative stories about us or others tend to result in dysfunctional social outcomes. The script itself tends to be out of our conscious awareness. Second, games. We all have our scripts and engage in various games that generally involve winners and losers. Games in transactional analysis have been defined as a series of duplex transactions which leads to a switch and a well-defined predictable payoff that justifies a not okay or discounted less than position. In a transactional game, we act out our internalized script and things go well for a while. Then we receive the strokes we expect to get from acting out our scripts. Instead of being vulnerable and authentic, until things inevitably go south. The switch, and then we get the payoff. C part, strokes. The pleasant or familiar thoughts and feelings we receive from playing social games with our internalized scripts. Fourth, switch. The moment when our internalized script's utility breaks down. This is usually when the script prevents us from expressing our authentic identity at that moment. We begin to feel sad, confused, and angry. Last, payoff. The usual expected result of our game, wherein we end up feeling a loser or less than. 5.7 Life Positions. A child is like a clean slate. However, in the process of growing up, he wades through a lot of experiences and emotions. These experiences lay the groundwork for making assumptions about their self-worth and the worth of significant people in the environment. Thomas Harris has called these assumptions life positions, which tend to be firmer than the ego states. During our formative years, we make decisions about ourselves, our world, and the people around us. These decisions get built upon the pattern of strokes we receive from our parents and primary caregivers. These decisions led us to accept one of our four basic psychological life states. Once a life position gets decided, it drives our pattern of thought, emotion, and behavior. The positions are required very early, that is, in childhood, and stay throughout our life. Life positions develop an individual's perception, which may be positive or negative. In this way, four life positions may be generated as shown in the following figure. Namely, I am okay, you are okay. Number 2, I am not okay, you are okay. Number 3, I am okay, you are not okay. Lastly, I am not okay, you are not okay. Let us discuss each life position one by one. Number 1, I am okay, you are okay. This is the ideal life position. People with this life positions have healthy relationships and a positive outlook. They are cordial, forthcoming, and accepting of themselves and others. Managers working from this life position feels comfortable delegating authority as they have confidence in themselves and their subordinates. This life position is based upon the adult ego state. Number 2, I am okay, you are not okay. It is occupied by those who project their difficulties onto others. They are blaming and critical. Transactional games that reinforce this position involve a self-styled superior, that is, I am okay, who projects anger, disgust, and disdain onto a designated inferior and a scapegoat. The you are not okay. This position requires someone to be worse than to maintain the sense of self as okay. Managers in this life position consider delegation of authority a threat because they do not trust others. These are the individual who possesses the rebellious child ego. Number 3, I am not okay, you are okay. People with this life position feel powerless and keep grumbling. They think others are more competent and have fewer problems. Managers working in this life position are unpredictable and erratic in behavior. They use their bad feelings as an excuse to act out against others. Lastly, I am not okay, you are not okay. This is a position of hopelessness, futility, and frustration. From this position, life seems uninteresting and hopeless. It may result in self-destructive or violent behavior. Managers in this life position neither take decisions on time nor properly delegate authority. Out of these positions mentioned above, the ideal one is I am okay, you are okay. This is because it indicates healthy acceptance of self, it demonstrates respect for others. It is likely to result in better communication. It is expected to result in better performance behaviors. The other three life positions are less mature and less effective. Thus, the life positions talk about the individual developing his identity, sense of worth, and perception of others during childhood. Once a person has decided on a life position, that will often remain fixed unless considerable effort is made to change the underlying beliefs and decisions about life. Transactional analysis, psychotherapy aims to bring awareness, explore, challenge, and change the ineffective life script. It is based on the belief that because we were the original creators of our script, we have the power to change it. 5.8 Stroke Analysis. From our earliest beginnings, in hetero, we depend on other person. We are born needing and seeking contact with an innate sense that we cannot survive without it. Throughout our lives, we receive this contact through various types of verbal and non-verbal communication. For example, a smile, a hug, praise for something we do or who we are, a challenge to something we do or who we are. In transactional analysis, these modes of contact are called strokes. Eric Berne described strokes as a unit of recognition, one person acknowledging another by way of act or speech. 5.8.1 Types of strokes: positive and negative, verbal and non-verbal, conditional and unconditional. Telling someone that we love them is an unconditional positive stroke, the ultimate one, whereas telling someone that we love their cooking is a conditional positive stroke. The former strokes the person's entire being, whilst the latter strokes one aspect of their being. Conversely, telling someone you don't like their cooking is a conditional negative stroke, and telling someone you hate them is the ultimate unconditional negative stroke. Throughout life, this communication develops our personality, informs our sense of self-worth, and defines our beliefs in ourselves, the world, and others. Depending on the type of strokes we receive before adulthood, we end up in one of four life positions as defined in transactional analysis. If the strokes we receive through childhood are appropriate to our age and stage of development and are a balanced mix of positive and negative as needed, then we are likely to grow up with a sense of I am okay, you are okay. In transactional analysis, this life position describes a balanced emotional and cognitive outlook on life. However, if the balance of strokes has veered far to the positive, contained too many negatives, or been an inappropriate mix, then we are likely to struggle with a fair sense of self and the world. Those brought up with too many positive strokes might hold the life position of I am okay, you are not okay, and struggle to see the other's point of view, having developed an overinflated sense of self-worth. On the other hand, children who receive too many negative strokes or not enough positive ones can grow into childhood believing others to be more important than themselves. This life position is called I am not okay, you are okay. Alternatively, they might hold the life position of I am not okay, you are not okay, with little hope for themselves and seeing little good in the world. 5.9 Psychological Games. Games in transactional analysis are a series of duplex transactions which leads to a switch and a well-defined predictable payoff which justifies a not okay or discounted position. Let us have a look at what that means. Firstly, what is a duplex transaction? A duplex transaction is where we say one thing and mean another. Only about 8% of our communication is through words. The rest is through tone, body language, and facial expressions. Berne observed that whenever we say one thing, the social message, and mean another, the psychological message, it is always the psychological message that gets heard. We tend to open games with duplex transactions, not saying what we really mean. Then the game will deliver positive strokes until the switch clicks in. The switch is the point at which things suddenly feel like they are going wrong. It is the point at which we may feel confused, scared, angry, or whatever our wrecked feeling usually is. This leads quickly to us taking a payoff. It confirms that whatever negative, untrue thoughts we have held on to about life are true. Let us give an example of a game and take it apart using the language introduced above. Let us take the game yes, but. In this, one person has a problem and another is invited to solve it. Everything the other person suggests is rejecting with a yes. That is, yes, I could do that. But here he insert reason for not doing that. We all know people who play this. We may even play it ourselves. Whilst it may appear the player is asking for help on the social level, what they are really doing on the psychological level is proving that they cannot help and no one else can control them. The switch comes when the other person gives up trying. The payoff for the player is proof that no one can help them even though they remain passive. Feelings of sadness and anger may accompany this. The other player in this game may feel helpless and frustrated that they have been unable to help the starter of the game. These feelings are likely to be very familiar to and reinforce a belief that they are not a very good friend, problem solver, or therapist, etc. It takes two to play a game. Why do we play games? Games are a way in which we can get strokes without risking intimacy and confirm our beliefs about life, mostly wrongly held ones. How do we stop playing games? The first thing we need to do is identify what games we are playing. Ask yourself, what patterns keep emerging in your life? What predictable events occur? What feelings do you often end up having? Spot the games and bring them into the light, where you can chew them over and decide whether you want to keep on playing or do things differently, avoiding negative payoff. 5.10 Johari Window. Johari Window is a framework developed by two psychologists, namely Joseph Luft and Harrington England, who combined their first names to name the model. It is a widely used model to understand and train self-awareness and biases for personal development and to improve communication, group dynamics, team development, interpersonal relationships, and intergroup relationships. People using the framework engage in two primary ideas: acquiring trust by revealing information about oneself to others and receiving feedback to learn more about themselves. The Johari window model captures such information, feeling, attitude, opinion, intentions, etc. from four perspectives as shown in the four quadrants. Figure 5.14 shows the four quadrants of Johari window. First quadrant is open area. Anything about yourself that you are willing to share with others. This is the region where actions, behaviors, and informations are known to the individual and those around him. This type of interaction is marked by openness and compatibility and has a very little possibility for defensive feelings and behavior. An open area is desirable as a team because when we work in this area with others, we are at our most effective and productive. This is the space where good communications and cooperations occur. free from distractions, mistrust, confusion, conflict, and misunderstanding. Soliciting feedback can help increase this area horizontally to reduce the blind spot while sharing one's feeling, and can extend the area vertically, reducing the hidden area. Second quadrant, blind area. Anything about oneself that you are unaware of but that others have become aware of. It reflects behavior, feelings, and motivation known to other parties but not to self. A person's observable habits, manners, feelings, etc. may be unknown to the self but known by others. Others may interpret these actions differently than what one expects them to. In fact, an individual may even annoy others unintentionally. This area could also be referred to as ignorance about oneself or issues in which one is deluded. Seeking feedback can help reduce this blind spot. Third quadrant, hidden area. Anything about yourself that you are reluctant to reveal to others is in the hidden area. It reflects behavior, feeling, and motivation known to self but not known to others. In other words, the individual understands themselves but does not know about others. The individual tends to be hidden from others for fear of their reactions. The true feelings or attitudes of the individual may remain a secret from others. It also includes sensitivities, fear, hidden agendas, manipulative intentions, and secrets. Anything that person knows but does not reveal. Individuals are reluctant to share such information as it may affect their relationship. Disclosing information to others can help decrease the hidden area. Last quadrant, unknown area. Any region that neither you nor anyone else is familiar with is the unknown area. The information in this quadrant is mysterious and has unknown potential. This includes subconscious information such as early childhood memories, undiscovered talents, etc. These feelings and motivations remain unclear till people allow these to surface. Uncovering hidden talents, that is, unknown aptitudes and skills, should not be confused with developing the juried hidden area. It is another aspect of developing the unknown area and is not as sensitive as unknown feelings. The unknown area could also include repressed or subconscious feelings rooted in formative events and past traumatic experiences, which may stay unknown for the lifetime. There are two interpersonal processes of disclosure and feedback, which cause the redistribution of awareness and changes in the size and form of the four quadrants. The model assumes that an open self becomes larger and the relationship tends to be more rewarding and productive. Thus, the model is dynamic and sensitive, especially to the interpersonal application of disclosure and feedback. The hidden self can be reduced and the open self can be increased through disclosure. The blind area can be reduced by seeking feedback from others, thereby increasing the open area, that is, to increase self-awareness. Therefore, managers must promote a climate of non-judgmental feedback and group response to individual disclosure and reduce fear. In the hidden area, relevant hidden information and feeling etc. should be moved onto the open area through the process of self-disclosure and exposure process. The extent to which an individual discloses personal feelings and information must always be at the individual discretion. Organizational culture and working atmosphere significantly influence team members' preparedness to disclose their hidden selves. The use of self-disclosure forms a mechanism for sharing awareness with others. However, self-disclosure involves risk for the individual and the outcome must be worth the cost. Likewise, the feedback process can decrease the blind self and simultaneously increase the open self. In the other words, others must give and the individual must use the feedback in social encounters. It forms the means whereby the individual encourages, supports, and presents themselves as open to the disclosure of others. In this context, the active solicitation of feedback data in social interactions is essential. 5.10.1 Application of Johari window in business. The Johari window serves as an essential tool to analyze the employee's potential, work on organizational relations, and improve team performance. The other people associated with the business also contribute to organizational improvement and development. These are the financial institutions, shareholders, customers, suppliers, etc. Taking into consideration the known and unknown facts by the company and the customers, the Johari window provides us with 4 quadrants. Let us see the various ways of modifying business relations using this model. Feedback to reduce blind area. Taking constant feedback from the customers and knowing about the competitive products that the customers may prefer makes the company aware of customer satisfaction level, product performance, customer loyalty, level of competition, etc. Being updated with the market trend and response diminishes the blind spot of the organization. Next, move out of our comfort zone to decrease unknown area. Innovation leads to learning, and learning contributes to growth and development. Therefore, the organization must explore new possibilities or diversify into new products or means of production through proper research and development to increase market share and profitability. Exploring the untapped opportunities and developing new ideas can maximize the open area by diminishing the unknown region and shrinking the blind spot and the hidden area. Next, disclosure to reduce hidden area. At times, some strengths or positive traits of the product or the organization are not promoted. As a result, this may not be known to the customer, creating a hidden area for the organization. Therefore, the organization must reveal its strengths like the premium quality of raw material used, the better shelf lives of products, etc., to develop customers' trust and loyalty. Conclusion: as we know that all 4 quadrants are unique, but to maintain transparency and cordial relations within the team, it is essential to maximize the open area. Thus, the Johari window aims to improve interpersonal relationships, behavior, attitude, and skills within an organization by continually assessing the scope of growth. 5.11 Summary. Transactional analysis is one of the most accessible theories of modern psychology. In the 1950s, Eric Berne began developing his transactional analysis theories. He said that verbal communication, particularly face-to-face, is at the center of human social relationships and psychoanalysis. Transaction refers to the communication between two persons. The transaction could be both complementary and cross in nature. Healthy communication occurs when individuals follow complementary transactions, whereas cross transaction causes most difficulties in social situations. The concept of ego states, life positions, psychological games, strokes, and the Johari window could help us understand how interpersonal relationships could become smooth. This life position influences our behavior when we interact with others. The life position refers to the specific behavior towards others that an individual learns based on certain assumptions made very early in life. Life positions develop an individual's perception, which may be positive or negative. Finally, Johari window model is dynamic to the interactive processes of disclosure and feedback. It assumes that interpersonal relationships tend to be more productive and rewarding as one's open self expands. Thank you for listening.